Hello to all. This is a re-recording of the first part of the Provider Portal briefing, which was held on Thursday, the 16th of June, 2022. So, why are we here? We're going to review the current LCC Care Provider Portal, briefly go over some of the issues which have raised concerns over the lifespan of the system, provide an overview of the replacement Lancashire Adult Provider Portal and the functionality that it has, and also to give a demonstration of that system to show how current processes will transfer and detail any new functionality that we are wishing to take advantage of. So why are we doing this now? The current LCC Care Provider Portal has had no significant developments since it was implemented in 2014, with the exception of a few minor tweaks and the addition of supply change requests. The Lancashire Adult Provider Portal does give us some better options for self-service and transparency of information. It's an opportunity for us to improve overall efficiency, both for Lancashire and also for providers as well. And also with the impending change of our financial system from Oracle to Oracle iSupplier to Oracle Fusion, it was not going to be possible to migrate the existing portal, so we had to come up with a solution. So if we look at the current LCC Care Provider portal, the current layout admittedly can be confusing and difficult to navigate. It is a very flat design with text and hyperlinks on screen, which can be difficult to understand and navigate. There is a general lack of feedback from the system for actions such as supplier change requests, but also for manual inputting of actuals, etc. And it is also not fully integrated into our systems, which can lead to situations where the data between the current care provider portal and the system used by Lancashire can sometimes become desynchronized. So the new adults provider portal provides an improved user experience with a graphical interface. It is more icon driven. More information is available, and that information is presented front and center in a more palatable format. It provides us with more customizable and automated notification tools so that you can be notified via email of any changes which have been applied or any actions that need to be responded to. And it is also fully integrated into our system for processing. As such, any changes which are applied either by Lancashire or by providers is immediately available for the other to view in real time. So the current portal, as you can see, does appear very flat. It is restricted to a list of options down the left-hand side with the data presented in the majority of the screen. The new portal, as you will see, presents that information in a much more user-friendly format, puts all the options front and center with some options for shortcuts along the top. It does give us some improved functionality, but also combines functionality areas into suitable headings. And we'll go through those headings now. You initially have actuals. So clicking through to actuals will give you the options for both manual submission and submission through the bulk import facility. Invoices and credit notes gives you the ability to view all currently input and or processed invoices and credit notes that have been applied to our system. Purchase orders gives you a breakdown on a per financial year basis of all the agreements commissioned in that period, along with any financial commitment that those agreements contain. Actions and change requests are where you will be able to view any requests you have submitted for CPLIs to be amended, but will also be used for other communications moving forward, which will be discussed later. care package line items, as per the current system, this is where you can view all the agreements which are currently open, but also any historical agreements for any client back to the beginning of those services, with the exception of any which have been removed due to data retention periods and GDPR. Email notifications. So at the moment, this will give you details of which email notifications you are subscribed to and how regularly those subscriptions will be processed. At the moment, these will be set as default and will not be able to be amended by providers directly. However, there is scope in future to open up this functionality so that you can have more control over the information that you receive. And finally, a new option for us, which is disputes. This will be discussed in more detail later. However, this relates to instances where submitted actuals need to be queried due to either some further information that's required on the submission or because contradictory information has been received from another source. Before we continue, there will be some new terminology changes which are applied as a result of the new system being applied. So what are currently known as supplier change requests, which are requests for CPLIs to be amended due to incorrect information, they will henceforth come under the wider title of actions. Within the new adult provider portal, the term of supplier change requests is reserved for requests to change information about organizations and the services they provide. This functionality will be initially turned off due to potential concerns over file contract naming integrity. Actions, so these will replace what are currently referred to as supplier change requests. These were relevant to most of the interactions via the adult provider portal, which will also include additional actions, which we will be discussing later on. These will also become the preferred method of communication between Lancashire and providers, replacing emails wherever possible and providing a more transparent and auditable communication pathway between the two organisations. And disputes. Disputes relate specifically to individual or groups of actuals where information has been received that states that either the actuals that have been submitted don't match with what was expected by another party, but also where, following the receipt of a submission, members of the accounts management team need to discuss that submission, potentially due to requiring further information, or also potentially due to an error in that submission. Disputes themselves can only be initiated by Lancashire Council. If there are any issues which need to be raised with the council over any actuals that have been submitted, this would be submitted as an action. We will now move on to a demonstration of the various functions of the new adults provider portal, and this is where we will rejoin the presentation that was given on Thursday, the 16th of June.
So, submitting your actuals, what would at the moment be known as enter actual for a manual submission. From your main screen, we would select the actuals option in that top left, and you will click through onto this screen. So this screen contains various pieces of information. Up in that top left, you have a weekly calendar. This will now correctly display in Monday to Sunday, as opposed to the current Oracle solution, which does list weeks from Sunday to Saturday. Down here, you will select whichever service you wish to query actuals on. So if you have multiple contracts with us, you will have multiple services listed here. And then in this area, you will see a full list of the actuals which exist for that service in that week. The view is restricted to 1 week at a time, but where there are multiple service users on this service, you would see them all simultaneously. So to submit or to edit your actuals, over on the right hand side of each line, there is an add and edit button. You will click onto that and that will bring you into an edit line. This is essentially the same information that you currently submit under Enter Actual. It's just presented horizontally as opposed to vertically. And Actual is now over in the far left. That is your first entry. As a minimum, we would expect Actual and the comments to be completed. There is a small restriction on the version of the import file that we have taken as part of this release, which means that when you pull bulk information, it will pull items that you have already submitted as well as those that you have not. We therefore are going to be recommending that for every submission you put a comment in, even if it's just the date of submission, so that if you do a bulk load, you are able to remove any items that you have already submitted previously. Updating that information, you'll see that the line goes yellow. That means that you have updated that information, but you have not yet saved that to the system. Upon hitting save, that line will return to green. And then when you go through, you will see that your information has been updated. The benefit of doing actuals through this system is that those actuals are updated immediately on our record. So at the moment, there is a manual process between your submission and the services being applied to our system. Moving forward, using the new portal, that information will be updated immediately. An added benefit is if you have submitted this in full and you subsequently realize that you have done this in error and you do need to correct it, you can go back in and update that information. So if you have submitted it incorrectly, you can go in, change your actual, put in any missed, frustrated or extra visits that you need to, update your comments, and again, that will be submitted and updated. You will notice that this particular line has been highlighted in red. That is purely because the amount of service actually delivered is less than the amount of service that was commissioned. It's nothing to worry about. If you don't submit, if you don't provide the full service, that's perfectly fine. It's just a visual representation of that. And again, that is duplicated on the front screen. So if we move on to bulk upload submissions, similarly again, from the home screen, you will go into the actuals option. And then on the left-hand side, towards the bottom, you will have an option of actuals bulk export, which will bring up this option. You will then be able to input the start and end date of the range you wish to query. In this case, we've chosen the 2 weeks from the 30th of May. And then you will click that export button, which will then present you with a file to be edited. I have squashed these onto the screen a little bit, so I do apologize if it's a bit difficult to read. So what we've got on here are three different versions of the same file. So the top is how it would come out to you without any additions or subtractions. It will give you your service reference, the service level. This has been anonymized to remove the client's name and service reference, the week commencing of that service, the planned quantity, and then it gives you it leaves the actual quantity blank and automatically places zeros in the remaining columns. So if you wanted to submit this service as it was, you would place your weekly actuals into that column. Again, you would add any appropriate comments into the comments field. If you do want to include your own internal invoice reference for for reconciliation purposes. You can still do that. You will, however, need to put it at the end of your comments after the pipe symbol. That is how our Oracle system identifies that as having to be listed as in your internal invoice reference. Similarly, go on to this bottom one. If you have any changes to that service, you would enter it in the same way that you do now. If you needed to put an extra in for initial assessment, you can do that here. If you need to put in any missed quantities, you can do that and update the actual. One thing that is going to be useful for you, I believe, is that you will no longer be required to submit extras for rounding. You will be able to submit the actual as you believe it to be correct. The system will accept that, and that will just raise a flag at our end to make sure that that submission is correct when we receive it. So it's one less thing that you're going to need to put into the extras column. So the extras column going forward would purely be for initial assessment, emergency hours, and notice. Once you have your file available, you will go to the same screen that we were at before. Then you can go to Actuals Bulk Import. Clicking on that option will bring up this screen where you can select the Choose File option and then locate the file that you wish to import. As loaded there, click the Import button, and then the system will do a brief check of the validity of your file. It will confirm how many records were in your file, if there are any new records in there, any records that are to be updated, and more importantly, if there are any that are going to be rejected or have data quality issues. Any errors that do appear will appear in the list below where it says errors and warnings. Provided you have no rejected or data quality issues, you can select Update System. You are able to back out of this at any stage by hitting cancel before you have hit that Update System button. Once you have hit that, not only is that file submitted, but it will then also be applied to our record. That, however, does not preclude you from then, if you identify that you've got an issue, going back into the actuals and updating anything that you need to be updated after the fact. So once you click on that, you will get an updating system. So when it says updating system, it is updating our system. And then you should get an option at the end of there to indicate that the import has been completed. Then if we go back to the actual screen, you can see that line that we had previously where we had 34 hours submitted and 1 missed. That has all been represented in there as you would expect, and that will be duplicated in our record. So that covers the basics of submitting actuals through the new portal. There aren't really any major differences in the actual information that's being provided. There's just some slight tweaks and adjustments in exactly how that information is presented and the actual aesthetics of the system itself. What we're going to move on to discuss now are when you want to submit a change of service action. So what will currently be called a supplier change request. So on your home screen, you can go to Care Package Line Items. Then it will bring up this search box. You can drill this search down as high or as low level as you wish in order to view the information that you require. You can go down by service, you can look for individual clients, you could look for individual type of service for an individual client. You can also hit the include historical checkbox to look at all all current and historical agreements for a client or all clients. In this instance, we haven't selected any of those. We've hit view, and this gives us the CPLI information for an existing service. If you identify this service actually ended. So if this service ended on the 1st of June and it is still being presented, over on the right hand side, we have the Submit Action button. So clicking on that button will bring you to this screen. So from here, you can select the type of action that you are submitting. So in this case, we are notifying of an incorrect CPLI because the end date is wrong, or there is no end date applied where there should be. And an action type like this can only be assigned to a client. There are other action types which can be allocated to different entities. For example, it can be attached to an invoice, it can be attached to a service, it can be attached to a whole contract. You are able to put a requested due date on the action. We initially will be requesting that a due date of, if you wish to put a due date in, it is not compulsory, a due date of no less than 5 working days for that issue to be resolved. That is at this moment, we perceive to be a limit for the issue to be resolved, not necessarily for the issue to be responded to. So we can input that there. And what you will notice is that by choosing this action type, this particular action can only be assigned to the care data team. So the type of action that you choose will determine which team within Lancashire that query is routed to. Input a title for your action, something appropriate, service has ended. In the text, particularly for CPLI corrections, those that are done through submit action on the CPLI, there will be some text pre-populated. We do ask that this is not overwritten because this will greatly assist, particularly the care data team, in being able to respond to your action. You can add any further text underneath that action that you need to. You do also have the option to attach any supporting documentation. So, for example, if you took or you agreed an increase in the package of care from emergency duty team, and you have an email from them confirming that request, you can attach that to this action so that there's no need for the care data team to go back and forth looking for that authorization. It will be able to be pulled through from the action that you submit. Once you have your action ready to go, down in the bottom left hand corner, you have the Create Action button. So that will create the action in the system. And then in the Action and Change Request Center, you will be able to see a list of all current open actions that you have with Lancashire and who they are currently assigned to. So this action has just gone through and is currently assigned to LA, which stands for Local Authority, and that is with the care data team at this time. You can click into any previous action to see the history, when it was submitted, who it was allocated to. You can also add any further comments onto that action that you might want to before it is picked up by a member of the assigned team. So when an action is responded to by Lancashire, by default, you will receive, or all registered users will immediately receive an email that an action has been responded to. This is obviously much better than the current system of having to go in and check to see if the care data team have responded to your inquiries. So you will be able to receive an immediate email notification of that. That can be customized if you feel that you're getting too many individual emails for actions being responded to. We can make a change in that setting so that you receive a daily summary email of all actions that have been returned. If we look into that action now, you can see that action now is assigned to the provider. So it is now waiting for action from the provider in order to update. You can filter the list down, so you can look at any actions that are assigned to yourself as the provider, or look at any that are still waiting on Lancashire to respond to. So in this particular action, you will see that I have responded to the query, advising that the agreement has been ended as requested, and that we are asking for you to confirm that this has been completed correctly and that the action can now be closed down. Provided that you go in and you see that the agreement is updated, again, because this is a direct window into our system, any updates that the care data team or any other team make will be immediately visible to you. Provided you are happy that the change has been actioned appropriately, you can select the request closure button in the bottom right hand side. You can either add some comments, so to confirm that it now shows as correct, or you can leave it blank. And then when you submit that, you will see that this particular user has requested that this action be closed. If you find that there is something incorrect, provided it has not already been processed, you can cancel that request to close the action. So we see, as it stands now, with that request having gone off and in this case, the care data team having closed the action, there are now no open actions in the actions and change request center. At any point, you can go into here, tick the include done actions and view any actions that you have previously had with Lancashire and view all the details of that interaction in case there are any queries that come out of it. Just as a point of note, any information which is exchanged between Lancashire and a provider via this system is recorded in our system. So in this particular case, this interaction would be recorded on the client record within our own system. So just to be aware that it will be subject to the same data retention rules under GDPR. So that was submitting an action for a change to a CPLI. So that is something that you're doing at the moment through the existing portal, albeit under the guise of supplier change requests. You can submit actions for other things through the system, but you might at the moment be submitting via email. So if you want to submit something from scratch, again, you would go to the actions and change requests option, and then up in the top right hand corner, you have a new action button. From here, you can select from this list of action types. This is our starting list and will be quite broad to begin with. As we start to get more queries coming through the system and we start to find like little pockets of action type that come through, we may split some of these up to make it clearer what actions relate to, both for yourselves and for members of the team. In this instance, we've selected a payment query. And you can see here the list of options has changed for this particular action type. This particular action type can be submitted against a contract, it can be submitted against a client, or it can be submitted against a specific invoice. Just to clarify, when we say that it can be submitted against an invoice, it's an invoice that exists within our system. So this would not cover any invoices that are outstanding. If it was anything to do with that, we would probably recommend that you submit an action against the contract or against the client if it relates to a specific client. Again, entity is a list of invoice references. Unfortunately, this list is not searchable. So we would probably recommend, if you are going to submit an action on an invoice, that you do it from that particular invoice, which is something that I will show you later. This is just to give you a demonstration of what is possible. Again, we've selected the invoice that we're querying. Again, we do request a due date of no less than 5 working days. You'll notice on this particular query, because it's a payment type query, this one can only be assigned to my team, which is accounts management. So that would only be picked up by someone in our team. Again, you can put in, you are required to put in a title. and put in some text as to what your query relates to. As with the previous action, you can attach any supporting documentation or any information that you want to be looked at. If you've got a statement of invoices that you want checking, you can attach that to the action. And again, you would submit that, and you'll see that this particular action now has come through, and it is assigned to the local authority, but this time to the accounts management team. And the interactions that you would have from that point on would mirror the same sort of interactions that you would have with the care data team in relation to resolving that particular issue. So those are actions. Like I say, when we issue our guidance, there will be a bit more detail on the sorts of things that we envisage going through as actions in the system. The advantage that we have with submitting things through actions is that everything is auditable. We've got a complete list of all provider queries that are outstanding. I can look at performance of the team and individuals and identify if there are any issues within the team that need to be addressed. But it also gives us the benefit that we've only got one set of information and we don't have the emails splintering off. And we've always got access to that particular piece of communication. So if we finish a line of communication, there's ever a query on it again, we can refer back to that without trying to find any emails that related to it. So the next thing I want to look at is disputes. So the language at the moment that we use, we refer to a dispute as relating to when you've submitted a supplier change request through the portal. So you're disputing the actual service itself. In the new portal, as I explained earlier, disputes in this portal relate to specific actual lines that you have already submitted where contradicting information has been received and we need to resolve that contradiction. So on this screen, you will see in the bottom left that there is one open dispute and one that is awaiting action. So again, these will be notified to you via email. I believe that they are currently set to a daily notification by default. Clicking onto that screen will give you details of the dispute or disputes. If you click on edit on the right hand side, you can get a bit of a clearer picture. So we can see here, so like who the client is. The status is that it is in dispute. The reason for the dispute is that this particular actual has been disputed by the client on receipt of their bill. Details that have been entered by a representative in Lancashire. In this case, the client has advised that they only received 33 hours in week commencing the 6th of June, whereas 34 hours have been submitted. And the request has been put through to check that submission. If on the provider side, you identify that yes, that submission is incorrect, you can click the add and edit button on the line below. And this brings up the same screen that we looked at earlier, where you can go in, you can make that correction. See there, we've corrected the actual to 33, put 2 as missed, save that. And again, once that has been saved, that immediately updates our record. Then following that, you can request that that is resolved. So you can put some comments in. So the actuals have been corrected in this instance. Hit request resolution, then that will go back to the source team. Most of these will come from the receivables team, so the team that deals with client billing. Some may very well come from accounts management in instances where your submissions don't, or we've run into a discrepancy potentially in your submission that we need to get clarification on. So that has gone to back to Lancashire for it to be resolved. Then once it's resolved, it will disappear from that list, but you will be able to view it under the resolved heading. If for whatever reason you do disagree with the information that has been provided, then you can send details of that information, or you can send information back to the receivables team or whoever has submitted that particular request. What will tend to happen then is if it's come through the receivables team, then they will pass that query on to us in accounts management, and then we will have a further conversation with you, probably through a separate action. However, until it is resolved, that dispute would remain open but held by Lancashire. So it would not be something that you would be expected on that particular screen to do any further action on. Once the issue is resolved, then whoever initially raised that dispute would then be able to close that down and remove it from the record. So this is just a little bit of an extra tool to try and standardize how we resolve issues like this, try and speed up that process a little bit, rather than involving too many teams to try and get the information. This gives the receivables team at source an ability to contact you directly to get any corrections that might need to be made, or get any further information, or anything that needs to be passed through to us in accounts management. So as I have detailed previously, you are able to view any invoices or credit memos that have been created within the system by Lancashire, regardless of their status. So it will include any invoices that have been created and processed out, any that have been created or are pending. In the top right, you can see invoices and credit notes. This will bring you through to a window which does break down by financial year. So it will depend which financial year the invoice took place in as to which are available to view on this list. We switch that list to 21-22. You do get a list down the left-hand side of all the invoices applied in that period. Again, this particular view does not have a native search function. However, in the majority of web browsers, if you hit Control and F, you can get in the top right, if you can see it, let me just see if I can get my mouse up. Up in this top right, you can get a search field within the browser itself. Then entering whichever invoice reference you are looking for will highlight it in the list on the left-hand side for you to be able to click through and thusly pick up the information or the top line information for that particular invoice. So the particular invoice demonstrates a payment for this particular client for the period 16th of August to 12th of September 21. It gives you the amount that it is that was included in that invoice to pay. So for some providers, that may be sufficient to complete reconciliation without having to go into iSupplier and dig further into the information. That said, the more detailed information will remain available within iSupplier. You can click through on any of those clients and you can look at the actuals that make up that particular payment. It is, as I've said before, restricted to a weekly view, but you can use the previous and next week options to scan through the actuals for that client. In case you're expecting a different balance, you can have a look and see exactly how that payment has been made up, maybe identify any errors, and if there are any errors, again, you are able to correct those directly through the system. You can also see anything that we have pending. So if we have created a credit memo from a perceived overpayment, that will appear on this list. As you can see here, we've got a credit memo in the status of pending. You can see here, it's not got anything on it because there was nothing to add on this particular one. It's just for demonstration purposes. But you can see here, it does have a reason status of awaiting provider response from an action. Then you'll see down at the bottom of the screen, there is another portal for actions. So you will see down there, we've got an action for an overpayment. it is directly linked to this credit memo. That one down there. And if we click through, it will take you back to the Action Center, and you'll be able to have a look at the action itself. You will also receive an email notification when it's turned on of the action related to that invoice, and I believe also notification that that credit memo has been created. So you potentially see two notifications. One just as a notification that the credit memo has been added, and one of an action that needs to be responded to. So that is a general top level overview as to what the new provider portal is capable of. As I've said before, many of the functions that you are using now remain available to you, just maybe processed in a slightly different way. And we will be making appropriate guidance available to you to be able to work through how that process will work going forwards. And also gone over some of the new functionality, which as a service, we want to try and leverage as much as possible to improve like the interactions between ourselves and you as providers, but also try and get any queries resolved as quickly as possible and have a single point of contact for those particular queries. So I suppose that the next thing to look at is the timeline for implementation. So on Monday, the 27th of June, we will take delivery of the live system. From this date, a small number of providers will be asked and or invited to run live testing on live data for their ongoing payments. We want to ensure that everything functions as expected before a mass rollout, identify any emissions from the processes or process notes that we have, and any volunteers to test the system will, of course, be welcome. So on Monday, the 18th of July, the new provider portal will go live for all providers. From this date, we would expect all providers to have received their login credentials for the new system, and we would be expecting providers to use the new portal exclusively in the pursuit of their business. The current LCC Care Provider portal will remain available for reference only and as emergency backup in case something does go wrong. We will not be able to process any actuals submitted through that system from the 18th of July. And then from the 18th of July, access to the current portal will begin to be removed from users who are signed up to the new portal. Any users who are not signed up to the new portal by this time will be contacted if they try and submit anything through that portal. So the guidance and support that will be available through Go Live, we are working on the written guidance at the moment. We aim to have that available to all providers by the end of next week in advance of the live proof testers picking up that work. It will contain more detailed information over the areas that we've gone over today, as well as more specific examples of submitting actuals through the manual process, the bulk process, submitting and responding to actions, etc. Additional bite-sized how-to videos are also being developed to provide additional assistance. So just little 2-3 minute videos just to go through like the various points and clicks of how you will process things moving forward. Support will remain available through the number that you have at the moment, which is the current iSupply support team. Additional resource will be added to that number during the implementation phase, probably for the first 6 to 8 weeks while the system beds in for providers. And bespoke email support will be available via the Exchequer Technical Development mailbox, where there will be where they'll have dedicated technical support officers available to look at any queries that you have. So just to recap what we've gone over this afternoon. Benefits of the new portal: provides an improved, more user-friendly user experience. It's got greater visibility and greater integration with Lancashire Information, and it provides us with significantly more robust communication and dispute resolution tools. Just a brief overview again of what the timeline for implementation is. So to confirm, 27th of June is when we take the system, and we'll run live testing with a small number of providers. And then from that point, we'll begin to issue everybody's login credentials and their guidance documentation. And from the 18th of July, we will be going live with that system moving forward. So that pretty much covers everything that we're going to discuss today. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to suggest we take a short 5-10 minute break, let you mull over what has been gone through today. It will also give people who are watching remotely an opportunity to ask any questions via the chat, and then we'll come back in approximately 10 minutes time. So we'll say 3:05, and we will answer any questions that you have in the room, and we'll go through any questions that are submitted via the chat online. So I think if we sort that now, I've got my colleague Keaton, who has decided to turn up. Is going to look through any questions that we're getting through on the chat, and we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
When you're doing your data capture, obviously the council are going to do all that.
Yeah.
Are we going to inherit any old problems by transferring that over, or are we going to try and get rid of any?
When we transition to the new portal, any data that you view will be exactly as it appears on our record. So if you have services that you show as outstanding on the portal at the moment, and we show that we've confirmed them, when we transition over, you will see those services as confirmed, and vice versa. So if you show them as transferred and we show them as outstanding, that information will transition over. The thing to remember about this portal is, as I've said before, it is essentially a direct window into our records. So anything that changes for us will change for you as providers. It's like almost immediately, if not immediately. So we're hoping to avoid any of those issues where there's a desync of information between ourselves and you providers, particularly in those situations where, because there is currently a manual process between you submitting and us loading those services to the system, it's like some actuals can get lost in the ether. So for example, you submit actuals on a service, before we come to pick those up, someone in care data goes in, it's like backdates a change in that service. When we come to pick up your actuals, we don't see those at all. They don't appear to us at all. Whereas in this system, even if that was to happen, we would still be able to see what you originally submitted on the previous agreement, because it would have been updated in real time. So at the point that you're submitting, if it's there available for you to submit against, we will always have a record of what you submitted, and it should cut back on a lot of these instances where we're having to come back to you to resubmit anything, or where there's a disconnect between the information that we hold on either side.
Fine, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I'm Anushka, I'm from 360 Degrees Healthcare. We're a domiciliary care and support organisation. One of the issues that we currently have is kind of when we've stayed extra at a client's due to like hospital visits and things like that, and then we're getting told by social workers, put it on your actuals, and then it's getting rejected. Would that be something that we could raise via the dispute and action?
It would depend on how many hours you need to put through.
Okay.
The terms of the contracts vary depending on the type of contract that the service is delivered under, provided that the instance is less than 4 hours. So as long as you're attending for less than 4 hours per instance, then within accounts management, we can authorise those as long as the comments support the reason for the emergency hours going through. If for whatever reason that service goes over 4 hours, so you have a carer that needs to start with someone all afternoon, for example, or for a lot of the day, or it is specifically requested by a social worker, we would not be able to authorise those.
We've had a lot in the past where when it's been less than 4 hours, it's still been rejected. That's
Right.
why I'm wondering if that's something we could then raise via the dispute.
It wouldn't come through dispute. It would go through action in order to query that. I would not expect them to be rejected. It might be something around like the supporting comments or something like that that might be confusing whoever's processing that at this end. If it does become an issue, the advantage that we'll have with this system is I'll be able to see the backwards and forwards of the actual itself. So when it is sent back to, because if we were to send it back, we would have to send it back as a dispute. Because everything updates in our system automatically, we don't have the option to just send it back to you and not process it into the system. If for whatever reason we don't think that that claim of extras is correct, we would send that back to you as a dispute, and then we could have that interaction through there. And if we needed to expand on that, then it would go through an action.
Thank you. There is a hand up online.
There is a hand up online.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just on that last one, I think it's worth mentioning that the social worker really shouldn't be asking you to just submit something via the actuals if it's not been planned and put into the system.
Currently when an actual is on the system for an amount, so for example, the actual is 0.2547. When we're claiming that amount of hours, it occasionally gets denied and states that it needs to be full numbers. Would that still be the same in the new system?
In the new system, you would only need to input the actuals as they were delivered. So if it does, for whatever reason, say 0.2459, I forget what the actual fractions are. But if that related to you delivered 1 hour on Thursday and it's just prorated that down, your submission of actual would just need to be 1. And then we will be able, when that came through to us, it would be highlighted that it's in excess of the planned quantity. But we would run a check over that. We'd check what was put onto the support plan to make sure that it's like what you were claiming is like aligned with what the support plan was saying in that first week or in that last week, depending on how it lined up. And provided that provided that was fine, then we would just leave that as is and it will process through as normal on that 1 hour. It is one of the advantages of going into this system that you're no longer going to have to put no longer going to have to put extras in for doing that rounding. I think it will still go to 4 decimal places if you absolutely need to. I think some services may have some actuals which do need to go that far down. But for the most part, it's like most of the rounding issues that we've had in the past shouldn't be an issue going forward.
The question is it an existing software package you use? Has it been tried elsewhere? And do we know it does work?
It is used by a number of other local authorities who also use the same contract and payment management system that we do. I know for a fact that it is used by Bolton. It's also used by Liverpool, Cheshire East, Cheshire West locally, and it's used by a number of other local authorities around the country. Our software provider, OCC, does deal with scores of other local authorities through their software. So this is a package that they have been developing for the last probably 7-8 years, and continually iterating on in order to get it to the stage it is now. And the advantage that we have is that as they continue to improve it, we're able to pass those improvements directly onto you as providers without having to go through any slight additional development work within Lancashire. That said, if during the course of you using the system you find anything that you think might improve it, or that there are some things that you think would be useful to have, then by all means, again, to that email address, drop us an email, and then we can start collating like any developments that we might want to put to them as a software developer, and see if we can get traction with other local authorities to.
So the deal is you're allowed to update. With Oracle, there were no updates allowed, were there?
It wasn't that there was no updates allowed, it was just a matter of the available resource within Lancashire to be able to develop it fully. Whereas with it being a service provided by OCC, most of the time, if we would want a change, it would have to be something bespoke. But if we identify something that a number of other local authorities support on, then we can generally work together with the local authorities to get those additions or improvements put through a little bit quicker. So it gives us, we do have options and opportunities with OCC to be able to work with them to improve the system further.
Cheers, thank you.
So that's a couple of QR codes for you, if you know how to use them on your mobile. If not, I will put links in the chat to this meeting, which you should all hopefully have access to. If not, I'll issue out a separate email to all attendees anyway. The form on the left is to express an interest in live testing. We do have one provider already lined up for doing that. If you are interested in live testing, then clicking through to that form will provide us with your details, and we can get in contact with you. We are looking for a variety of service types, so across home care, day support, supported living, extra care, etc. So I would say putting your name forward doesn't guarantee that you'll be considered for the live testing, but we want to try and get a broad range of providers in that. And then the one on the right is just a little bit of a feedback form for you to fill out, just around the briefing that you've had today. And I said this is the first one of these that I've done myself rather than just participating in, so it's a bit of a learning experience for me. So any feedback that you can provide to me will be very much appreciated.
The system goes live on the 27th.
Yes.
And the next lot of invoicing is the 18th, isn't it, of July?
It is, yeah.
So how are people gonna test it if you're not, because it's the majority of it is for the invoicing side, is it not?
Yeah. So those who will be doing the live testing, we will be having discussions with around what the information that what we don't want to do is have them submit an entire period's worth of actuals and then something go wrong. And then we've got to try and catch up so that we don't interfere with their payments too much. But likewise, we don't want to leave it to the back end of the period where there's very few things going through. So we've had to be a little bit thoughtful about where we land that testing cycle. Like I say, when it does go live fully on the 18th, there will be dedicated resource available on the phone and by email for any issues that you might have. So there'll be the regular people on iSupply support, and then there'll be myself and at least one other technical support officer available to take any queries on that, and we'll have Keaton at our beck and call for go live support as well, and just in case anything does come up. We're aware that it's a short time scale in order to bring it in. However, we do think that, well, what I'm hopeful is that because a lot of the processes themselves aren't going to change, and it's like how the information is presented, it won't be as big a shift in how we do things now as to when the current portal came in back in 2014. It's a much less seismic shift. Yeah. So that's what, like I say, a lot of it is down to making it as user friendly as possible. The advantage that we have as well is that if you log in and you can't see something, or you're not sure where to find something, anybody who's on the call with you supporting can actually log in to your organisation and can actually view the options that are available to you, and can actually click through with you to the various areas, which is an option that we don't have at the moment.
Well, you can't see what I see.
We can't see what you see, whereas with this system, we can go in and we can directly see what you see as a provider, which will obviously it will make that support element of it that bit easier for both for us and more effective for you as well. So I'll just leave that up on screen for anybody who has remained at home. But all I would like to say at this point is thank you, everybody, for attending today, both in the room and online. Like I said, if you do have any questions at all, then just drop us an email to that technical development email address, and we will do what we can to answer those questions as fully as possible. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.